There's a sentence that sounds like peace, but it's often a funeral. I don't even want that anymore. It comes out of people's mouths like wisdom, like maturity, like they've grown beyond childish dreams. But sometimes it isn't growth at all. Sometimes it's your mind doing emergency surgery on your hope, without anesthesia, because wanting something you can't have is painful. It scratches at the inside of your ribs. It keeps you awake. It makes you feel stupid for trying. So the brain offers a bargain: stop wanting. Not by actually fulfilling you, by convincing you you never wanted it in the first place. And you believe it. Of course you do. Believing it is cheaper than grieving. Tonight we're talking about adaptive preferences, the psychological phenomenon where you choose what you've been forced to live with, where you downgrade your desires so reality stops humiliating you. It's like a daily, socially acceptable version of Stockholm Syndrome. And if you're watching this with a strange tightness in your chest, like something here is aimed directly at you, yeah, that's the point. Let's break it down in plain language. Adaptive preferences are what happen when your wants get reshaped by your limits. Not by your values, not by your authentic self, by your cage. If a door stays locked long enough, you don't just stop trying to open it. You start telling yourself you never wanted to go outside. And the twist is, this isn't weakness, it's not stupidity. It's not you settling because you're lazy. It's often psychological survival. If you're poor, if you're trapped in a job that drains you, if you're stuck in a city you can't afford to leave, if your body is exhausted and your future feels rented out to someone else, wanting more can start to feel like self-harm. So you adapt. You learn contentment the way some people learn to stop crying as kids, not because the pain disappeared, but because nobody came. And you start saying things like, I don't care about traveling, it's overrated. Dream jobs aren't real, work is work. I actually like being busy all the time. Relationships are a scam anyway. I don't need rest. Rest is for people who can afford it. That last one, especially. It's basically a confession written as a flex. And this is where it gets creepy. After a while, you don't even feel like you're lying, because the mind is unbelievably good at building a story that matches the life you're already living. Let's anchor this in something real. Imagine someone working 2 jobs. One is a morning shift at a grocery store. The other is deliveries at night, DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever keeps the lights on. Rent eats half the paycheck. A surprise medical bill shows up like an assassin. Their phone is always at 12%. Now tell that person, follow your passion. They'll laugh and it won't be a happy laugh. So they adapt. They start saying, I like the grind, it keeps me out of trouble. Or, I'm not the type of person who needs vacations. Or, I don't even want kids. Kids are annoying. Maybe they genuinely don't want kids. That's not the point. The point is, when life blocks a desire long enough, it becomes impossible to tell whether you outgrew it or you amputated it. And society loves adaptive preferences because they make suffering manageable, quiet, polite, non-revolutionary. If you can convince yourself you prefer the life that's crushing you, then nobody has to change anything. Not your boss, not your landlord, not the system, not even you. You become the perfect employee of your own limitation. Now let's talk about the other side. Not just poverty, but toxic work culture. The glossy, expensive version of the same phenomenon. You know the type of place. The Slack messages at midnight. The "we're a family" line delivered right before they ask you to sacrifice your weekend. The quiet competition over who's most exhausted, like sleep deprivation, is a medal. In some industries, having a life is treated like a character flaw. So people adapt. They stop saying, this is killing me, and start saying, I love being challenged. They stop saying, I'm lonely, and start saying, I'm laser focused. They stop saying, I'm afraid, and start saying, I'm built different. But watch what happens when they finally get a free evening. They don't know what to do with it. They feel restless, guilty. Like they're committing a crime. They check emails, they refresh notifications, they invent tasks. They go to the gym like they're being chased, then come home and collapse with a sense of hollow victory. Because the nervous system has been trained, stillness is danger. And eventually the identity forms, I'm just the kind of person who likes working all the time. Are you though, or did you just get used to it? Let's be honest for a second. Some of you don't even know what you like anymore. You know what you can tolerate. You know what pays. You know what impresses people. You know what keeps your anxiety quiet. But desire, real desire, the kind that makes you feel awake, that's fuzzy. And that's exactly what adaptive preferences do. They blur the line between choosing and coping. Adaptive preferences don't usually announce themselves as surrender. They come in wearing logic. Your mind becomes a public relations department whose job is to make your life sound intentional. You didn't stop pursuing art because you were crushed by debt and time. You stopped because art is unstable and you're practical. You didn't stop dating because you were repeatedly disappointed and emotionally exhausted. You stopped because relationships are distractions and you're protecting your peace. You didn't abandon your dream of writing a book because your job leaves you numb. You abandoned it because books don't matter anymore and you're not looking for validation. Maybe some of those statements are partially true. Life is complicated. But here's the acid test. Does that story make you feel free, or does it make you feel numb? Because rationalization has a certain emotional flavor, it feels like a sealed room, like you've talked yourself into a smaller life and called it maturity. And when someone challenges it, when someone says, "But what if you could?" you get defensive. Not because they're wrong, but because they just touched the wound you've been carefully bandaging. Here's the oh shit moment. Adaptive preferences can look like mental health. From the outside, it's stability, it's acceptance, it's being realistic. From the inside, it might be your spirit going quiet so it stops getting hurt. The scary part is that you can build an entire personality around coping. You can become the chill one because you learned not to ask for much. You can become low maintenance because you gave up on being cared for. You can become not ambitious because ambition kept getting punished. You can become independent because depending on people didn't work. And everybody praises you for it. They call you grounded, resilient, easygoing, strong. But nobody asks what it cost. And then one day, out of nowhere, you're watching a random movie and a character does something reckless, moves to a new city, confesses love, quits the job, starts over, and you feel this sharp, irrational grief. Not jealousy, not admiration, grief. Because a part of you recognizes what you buried. That's adaptive preferences revealing themselves, not as a thought, but as a mourning. People usually explain this concept with some old fable about someone failing to reach grapes and deciding they were probably sour anyway. Cute, but modern life has a more brutal version. It's not grapes, it's healthcare, it's housing, it's education, it's time, it's dignity. It's the ability to be a person instead of a productivity machine. You try to reach. You get rejected over and over. You watch other people reach easily because they were born closer to the vine. And eventually your brain goes, okay, we can't keep doing this. So it changes the goalposts inside you. Not because you're weak, because constant longing is exhausting. It drains you like a slow leak, and then you start calling the leak a lifestyle. There's a difference between contentment and learned contentment. Real contentment feels alive. It has gratitude in it, but it also has space for desire, for growth, for hunger that isn't shameful. Learned contentment feels like anesthesia. It's, I'm fine, but the fine has no color. And the reason this matters is because adaptive preferences don't just keep you from pain, they keep you from possibility. If you've convinced yourself you don't want more, you'll stop noticing doors. If you've convinced yourself rest is lazy, you'll feel guilty when your body begs. If you've convinced yourself love is a distraction, you'll feel superior while slowly starving. And you'll call it strength, which is exactly how a cage becomes a home. No toxic positivity. No just follow your dreams nonsense. You don't need motivational quotes, you need clarity. Here are 3 shifts that actually help. This question is surgical. Would you want your job exactly as it is if you had enough money to be safe for 2 years? Would you want your schedule if nobody praised you for being busy? Would you want your relationship dynamic if you weren't afraid of being alone? Would you want your current preferences if choice was real? Don't answer fast. Adaptive preferences are fast, they're reflexes. Sit with it until you feel the uncomfortable truth underneath the story. This is a weird one, but it works. When people talk about rest, do you roll your eyes? When people talk about romance, do you scoff? When people talk about creative dreams, do you call it naive? Maybe you're right. Maybe they are naive. Or maybe your defensiveness is the scar tissue of a desire that got injured. Sometimes cynicism is just grief pretending to be intelligence. You don't have to blow up your life to reclaim yourself. Try micro-tests. If you think you don't like mornings, try a week of waking up without immediately checking your phone. If you think you don't care about art, spend 30 minutes making something bad on purpose. If you think you prefer being alone, try one honest conversation where you don't perform strength. Your real preferences will show themselves in the body, not as a perfect plan, as a subtle sense of aliveness. And if you feel nothing at first, if it's numb, that's data too. Numbness usually means you've been in survival mode for so long that desire is asleep, not dead. You don't shame yourself for that. You treat it like thawing, slow, gentle, consistent. Adaptive preferences are terrifying because they don't just convince you to endure a life you didn't choose. They convince you to defend it. So here's what I want you to answer in the comments. No performance, no sounding enlightened, just truth. What do you call a preference that you only developed after you realized you couldn't afford the alternative? And a second question, quieter but sharper. If your life suddenly became easier, more money, more time, more safety, what part of your personality would immediately fall apart? Because it was never you, it was just survival.